Board meeting on KTRS.
9:10, good morning. This morning, it's January 2nd, and the board meeting is officially in session. House Majority Leader, Speaker in Waiting, John Deal. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, McGraw.
Good to see you. Losing weight, looking great, by the way.
Thanks. Keep trying. Another year.
Another year.
Yep, that's right.
Also with us is former Chief of Staff to Governor Holden and local attorney and local gadfly, Jane Duker. Jane, good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. Glad to be here.
And filling in for Tony Messenger, who I believe Tony Messenger is filling in for John Carney today, is State Senator Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, welcome, Big 550 KTRS.
Good to be back. Good to see you.
In terms of full disclosure, you can do virtually nothing wrong since you sit on the board of Nurses for Newborns. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and I appreciate that.
Okay. That is one. Two, just a public relations suggestion to you.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
When you stand behind Governor Nixon in all those Boeing news conferences, it looks like someone stole your puppy. Smile a little bit.
Well, it was a serious moment, McGraw. I didn't want to make light of it. Well, and then I'm one of the few people probably taller than Governor Nixon in Jeff City, so you can see my head above his head even, so it's at a disadvantage.
But you at least got invited.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I was sitting on a plane.
I wasn't in charge of the invite list.
I was sitting on a plane from St. Louis to Phoenix with Governor Holden. Governor Nixon. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sitting in the front
Often
row.
Confused.
Front row center. He must have signed in for the early bird. On Southwest.
He's got some crack staff.
Yeah, I guess so. So he was sitting in the front row.
Where was your staff?
My staff was in the way back with the chickens.
Gotcha.
I think he might be buying Business Select instead of Want to Get Away fares.
Oh,
that probably costs taxpayers some money. We need to look into that.
I actually thought we paid for his plane. Didn't we pay? Doesn't the governor have a plane? What's he doing flying?
He does have a $7 million plane.
He
What's
he doing? Fly out of state on that.
A King Air.
He can't fly out of state.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that they take that cross country.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we pay for his peanuts though. So
okay.
He probably wanted to.
I don't know, and I don't know who, but he was picking up golf clubs at the
he loves
roundabout.
golf. He's a sports guy.
So, there you go. All right, good. All right, let's get right to it. Jane Duker, you want to comment on the Archdiocese? They've a couple of interesting lawsuits have come down the last couple of days.
Well, what's interesting is you have an order out of the circuit court down in St. Louis City. Judge Durker has finally ordered the Archdiocese to turn over documents relating to over 200 priest abuse complaints. And what he has ordered them to do is to take the ones that they believe are substantiated, which is also going to be a very interesting debate, I'm sure. But the judge was very strong with the Archdiocese, basically saying you're virtually in contempt because you've been refusing to turn over records and to turn over documents about the history of priest abuse in the Archdiocese. And so he's starting to bring the hammer down, and I think it's a long time coming. Unlike a lot of the other cases you've been hearing about, this is a civil suit, and it's involving a woman who was abused by a priest about 16 years ago. And so, we're really starting to get into the discovery process. And the Archdiocese, they brought in lawyers from, out of town. And so I guess that probably makes it a little bit easier for them to fight these records.
Let me ask a question here, and I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
If a private institution had some pedophiles in it and they dealt with it, why should that be made public?
Well, because it's how they deal with it. And I think a lot of the allegations surrounding the Archdiocese was that they were on notice that there were priests who were abusing children. They would send them away to camp, and then they would, bring them back and put them in a parish, and it would happen again. And, granted, this was a long time ago, and before probably people knew a lot about what pedophilia was and how to deal with it effectively. But I think it's legitimate area of inquiry because whether these, people, these children who've been abused by priests who were, where the Archdiocese was on notice that there was a problem, I think that's fair game. And the judges finally said, look, it's time to air this stuff out. You got to let it out. We get to, they get to look at and see how you handled these priests to see if some of this damage could have been prevented.
And they have until tomorrow to release all this.
They have until tomorrow. And now the Archdiocese does get to make a determination as to whether they thought there were complaints that were substantiated. And so I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion over that. But I think for me as a Catholic, I want this to be over. I'm not saying that the Catholic Church is all wrong, and they're certainly not all right. But it's time, and we need to move on. They need to let this stuff out, get it over with, and move on and get back to being the church. And, everyone wants to believe that the church is a safe place for families and children, and it's time. So I'm actually glad that this is going to get aired out, and let's get it done.
John Deal.
Probably years of stonewalling have
Yes.
made this much worse than it probably should be right now in terms of, or I should say more dramatic than it should be at this point in time. I think there's a fine line that has to be drawn. Are the records being sought to try to find potential victims to make sure that they're properly treated and addressed and counseled, or are they being found for a couple of lawyers to try to get more attorney's fees in the process?
Right.
And I think that's kind of what the fine line is. To the extent that they're being used for the cover of it, or what they say it is, hey, let's find who these people are. Let's make sure that they're getting the right treatment, that they're not, some of the damage that's been done to them in the past, they're not now repeating that damage to other kids. I think that's a good thing. I'm a little hesitant to the extent that it just allows people to file more lawsuits to collect money.
But no one's questioning these priests are still around. These are all old allegations. This is things that happened in the 80s, 90s, and 70s, right?
Yeah, some of them, absolutely.
Right.
And I agree with John that, and I like that the judge here is being very hands-on, and he's reviewing this stuff in camera, and he's looking at it to try to strike that balance to say, look, there's a legitimate purpose here, there's a non-legitimate purpose, and he's been very clear that, look, he's trying. I think he's trying to be accommodating to the archdiocese, but he's about had it with them. And so I agree with you that they've sort of baked their own mess here by being recalcitrant over the years, and they were recalcitrant in criminal cases. I mean, that's when I had really a lot of trouble. I agree in the civil context it's a little different, but there were times when they were not, turning over records in criminal cases. And so I do think this is a lot of buildup, but I think it's time.
Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, I think, and all three of us are lawyers on the panel here, I guess. And so without knowing the details of all the legal arguments, clearly I think this is a time that has come over several years of litigation, particularly on the civil side. And there's a lot of buildup. I think it's probably part of an effort to determine whether or not there was a pattern of practice.
Yep.
Of if this was a policy that was implemented by the archdiocese, and all those arguments will have their day, and it looks like sooner rather than later. And as a Catholic, I'm also a Catholic. John and I are both just met Jesuit guys, and we got our Jesuit Pope in there. So I think it's important for the church too, not first and foremost for the victims, to get justice and closure, but then for the church to move on past this, because I do think there's been a lot of effort with the new Pope of trying to reach out to folks who maybe have felt like the church wasn't in touch with their needs in modern society. So.
It's a death by 1,000 cuts is what the Catholic Church has done. The fact that we're still talking about this, the fact they're still stonewalling it. Look at Penn State. You can't get a worse situation than Penn State. And Penn State said, get it out.
Right.
When they finally acknowledged it,
right.
Get it out. We'll take as much bad as we can right now, and then let's move forward. The Catholic Church is killing themselves by having this leak out piecemeal every 6 months, another story, another 6 months, another 2 years. I mean, we've been talking about this thing for 10 years now. At
least. And I agree with Eric. I'm so inspired by the new Pope, and haven't been for a long time by the Catholic Church. And I think this new attitude of getting more in touch with the flock is really it's a new chance, and it's a new chance for this archdiocese, and I hope they take it.
All right, coming back, John Deal will join us. He wants to talk about there are some governors who want to give illegals in-state tuition. We'll discuss that next here on the Big 550 KTO.